Coming up on Arirang News, President Moon Jae-in nominates the veteran lawmaker and business expert Chung Sye-kyun to serve as his new prime minister, a choice he hopes will help lead the administration's economic agenda to fruition. South Korea and Japan hold high-level talks on trade. No major progress, but some trust was built, and they agreed to keep talking. And South Korea announces a 10-year plan for artificial intelligence, which includes billions of dollars in funding and giving government data to developers so they can create new platforms. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. President Moon Jae-in has nominated a political veteran, Chung Sye-kyun, to serve as prime minister, replacing Lee Na-kyun, who's stepping down. Chung is a 6-term lawmaker and a former parliamentary speaker, and he would be Moon's second PM. Here's the president in today's press conference.
국내외 환경이 여러 가지로 어렵지만 새 국무총리 후보자는 서로 화합하고 협력하며 민생과 경제를 우선하도록 내각을 이끌고 국민들께 신뢰와 안정감을 드릴 것입니다.
Chung will be Korea's first prime minister to have previously been National Assembly Speaker. Known as an expert on the economy, Chung also served as Commerce Minister during the Roh Moo-hyun administration. President Moon says he hopes Chung's strong economy-related background will give critical help to the administration's economic policies. Tensions seem to be rising between the U.S. and North Korea, with the regime threatening what many believe to be a new missile test in the coming days and weeks. In the meantime, Russia and China have reportedly asked the UN Security Council to ease sanctions on North Korea, but the U.S. rejected that proposal, saying it's not yet time to consider sanctions relief. Lee Kyung-eun reports.
Beijing and Moscow submitted a draft resolution to United Nations Security Council on Monday, calling for an easing of sanctions on North Korea. The two countries have been pushing for this since Pyongyang pledged to work toward denuclearization last year, but it is the first time they've actually taken action. The new draft proposes lifting the ban on exports of seafood and textiles, as well as North Koreans working abroad. North Koreans are currently banned from working overseas, and UN members have until next week to repatriate North Korean workers under a previous UN resolution. Russia and China's draft also suggests removing sanctions on inter-Korean rail and road cooperation projects. The two Koreas have held a symbolic groundbreaking ceremony for the inter-Korean rail and road projects, but have made no further progress due to sanctions on all inter-Korean projects, which prohibit the transfer of related equipment and parts. All of the above used to serve as the reclusive regime's key route to earn foreign currency, and experts say that China and Russia are attempting to keep the door open through easing sanctions. However, the two countries say it is rather of a humanitarian nature, citing the importance of the livelihood of North Korean civilians. They had also previously suggested a roadmap for sanctions relief last Wednesday, when they said sanctions are not an end in itself, but a means to achieve an end, and they only aggravate the humanitarian crisis in the north. For the new resolution to be implemented, it needs the support of 9 of the 15 Security Council members and must avoid being vetoed by one of the 5 permanent members. Bloomberg reports that the members are likely to review the draft on Tuesday, but the chances of being actually passed are very unlikely. Amid the continuing deadlock in denuclearization talks and military provocations by the North, the U.S. is maintaining its hardline stance, with the State Department saying it is not the time to consider sanctions relief. And as Britain and France, who also have veto power, are likely to follow the U.S. lead, the future of the resolution largely depends on Washington. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has spoken up on North Korea for the first time in a while, saying he's keeping a close eye on the regime and hopes it won't conduct any more missile tests. Park Se-young has more.
With tensions gradually on the rise in recent weeks, U.S. President Donald Trump said on Monday that he would be disappointed if North Korea had something in the works with respect to its nuclear and long-range missile programs.
We're watching it. We'll see. I'd be disappointed if something would be in the works, and if it is, we'll take care of it.
During a roundtable discussion with governors at the White House, President Trump said he's keeping a close eye on Pyongyang, adding he's watching, quote, many places very closely. His comments come amid an uptick in tensions between Pyongyang and Washington, especially following the North's increasingly aggressive rhetoric towards the U.S. and even Trump himself. North Korea has given the U.S. until the end of a year to make concessions in their stalled nuclear talks, hinting the regime would resume nuclear and long-range missile testing otherwise. If the U.S. fails to meet its demands, the North warned it could send Washington an ominous Christmas gift and adopt an unspecified new way. President Trump has long said he will not lift sanctions until Pyongyang fully abandons its nuclear program. Also on Monday, U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun said Washington has no deadline to meet, but added he doesn't intend to give up on reviving the stalled negotiations. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
In the film awards season, it's been win after win for the South Korean movie Parasite. Up next could be an Oscar. Parasite has made the Academy shortlist for Best International Feature Film and Best Original Song. Kan Young-woo reports.
South Korean film Parasite, directed by Bong Joon-ho, has made the Oscars shortlist for Best International Feature Film and Best Original Song. Many critics expected the black comedy to survive the first cut for Best International Film, but its song, A Glass of Soju, also being shortlisted, came as a pleasant surprise for Korean movie fans. It was named on the shortlist for Best Original Song along with 14 other songs like Into the Unknown from Frozen 2.
But I think what it really shows is that Parasite is such a huge contender in so many categories at the Oscars. So it's not just limited to the Best International Film category. So I think this bodes well for nominations in other categories as well.
Earlier in the day, Parasite added to its awards collection, winning top honors from the San Francisco, Seattle, and Vancouver Critics Associations. Bong Joon-ho's black comedy has practically swept the film awards across North America and had already received a number of prizes from the Film Critics Associations in Chicago, LA, New York, and Toronto.
I think it does show how far some people have come, such as especially like Bong Joon-ho, and how they can be accepted now in Hollywood just by viewers around the world. It's been incredible to see how it's been doing with these film critics groups.
On top of that, Parasite has recently become the first ever South Korean film to be included in the final list of nominations for 3 Golden Globe Awards: Best Foreign Language Film, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. With Parasite now on the 2 shortlists for the Academy Awards, eyes will be on whether the South Korean movie can move on to the final nominations in January for those categories, or even get nominated for one of the Oscars' biggest prizes like Best Film or Best Director. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
Video footage and other resources from Arirang TV will soon be made available through the National Library of Korea. Arirang and the National Library signed an MOU on Tuesday, under which Arirang will donate around 100,000 works of video and text, which will give the library more resources. The benefit to Arirang is that the footage will be digitized and preserved using the library's infrastructure. The chief executive of the National Library says this is a win-win project for both sides.
Traditionally, information was delivered through print media, mainly in the form of books. But now, with video taking up an ever greater share, there is increasing demand for video and digital media. Through this MOU, the National Library of Korea can give people knowledge through a range of media, and Arirang TV can preserve its content forever. In other words, content can be delivered not only to our generation, but also to the next.
Of the materials to be donated, users and individual creators will be able to use more than 2,000 videos in unwatermarked form free of charge, such as Arirang's special HD documentary about the Confucian academies of the Joseon Dynasty. This service can be accessed through the National Digital Library of Korea. Senior trade officials from South Korea and Japan met yesterday in Tokyo for about 10 hours. No concrete outcomes, but tensions have been high between the two countries since last summer when Japan imposed strict new export restrictions. So they're believed to have at least built some trust. Kim Hye-sung reports.
South Korean and Japanese trade representatives improved their understanding of each other's export control systems, but achieved no tangible results in dialing back the enhanced screening measures. The Director General of International Trade Policy at Seoul's Trade Ministry, Lee Ho-hyun, and his counterpart Yoichi Ida met in Tokyo on Monday for about 10 hours, 3 hours longer than scheduled. The two sides said the resumption of export talks after a gap of 3.5 years was meaningful in itself, but there was no substantial progress in Japan's export curbs on high-tech materials, which it imposed on Seoul in July amid a row over Japan's use of Koreans as forced laborers during the Second World War remain firmly in place. South Korea's trade ministry on Tuesday said the two sides were able to boost mutual understanding on their respective export management systems and agreed on the need for a viable management of exports under the current security environment. Japan's Trade Minister Hiroshi Kajiyama declined to provide specifics on which areas the two countries had deepened their understanding, but welcomed the fact that the export dialogue took place, adding that Japan will make a decision on whether to ease its controls on the strategic chemicals if the two sides keep getting more confirmation through talks. The meeting is being viewed as progress toward restoring trust between Seoul and Tokyo and could build positive momentum in the days leading up to planned summit talks between South Korean President Moon Jae-in and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe next week in China. South Korea and Japan agreed to hold the next round of high-level export talks in Seoul in the near future. 김혜성, 아리랑 뉴스.
Over in the U.S., President Trump is facing impeachment in the House of Representatives, but that's not stopping the administration celebrating its so-called Phase 1 trade deal with China. Officials there are saying it's a win for the American economy and will cause shipments of American goods to China to double. Kim Yo-sun has more.
The Trump administration is giving itself a high five for reaching a Phase 1 trade deal with China. It says the so-called big deal that was reached with Beijing last Friday will soon lead to visible economic growth in the U.S. This, the administration believes, will give President Trump even more firepower to use against his Democrat rival in next year's presidential election. Regarding the deal, White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow told reporters Monday that the agreement will double U.S. exports into China.
We are going to double U.S. exports. The positive effects on economic growth in this country cannot be exaggerated. That's why I keep calling this growthier.
He also said the deal is complete and will probably be signed by both parties early next month. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer also hailed the deal that was reached after a contentious 18-month trade war. During an interview with CBS News on Sunday, he said American exports to China will jump by nearly $200 billion in the next 2 years. Currently, U.S. exports to China stand at roughly $130 billion. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin labeled the deal, quote, historic, adding it will contribute to global economic growth as well. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you as always for coming on.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
So South Korea and Japan held talks yesterday in Tokyo on trade. While there was no real concrete outcome, they're going to keep talking. Tell us a little bit about that meeting, and do you think this does anything to relieve concerns in the market about this trade dispute?
Sure. I think definitely it is positive news. South Korea and Japan on Monday agreed to continue talks to resolve their various differences, and they have said that it is expanded mutual understanding of each other's export control system. As you know, there has been a lot of discussion regarding the trade dispute, and that has caused quite a bit of concern regarding the Korea's semiconductor business as well as various other export-related businesses. And that has caused the concern about Korea might be going to the recession in the future, as well as the concern for Japan as well. All in all, these things were somewhat politically driven as the Jisomiya results was coming through before, and that caused the concern that the unsettlement between the Asian major countries such as Japan and Korea. However, in the future, we think that there will be more negotiation will be happening. It is net any type of dispute that happens in regards to trade is actually losing factors for both countries in any countries that were involved in a trade war. So we think that the positive indication will be the sentiment that the so far big the fight that has happened between the Japan and Korea and the concern by the citizens will probably somewhat go down in the future in terms of the level of the dispute that's happening. So therefore, we think that the overall equity market, overall economic conditions should be benefiting due to the talks that are happening between these two countries.
Right. Well, other positive news led stocks on Wall Street to start the week with yet more new all-time highs. What's the story there and in the markets here in Asia?
Sure. If you look at U.S., a net 7% of stock on NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange hit the 52 weeks highs in last week. This is definitely a very bullish sign for the market. That's because the sentiment regarding the trade dispute has become much better for the market that they have signed the first phase of the trade deal. The traders are saying basically these kind of indications that signaling the further growth of the equity market in the future. In terms of looking at the cyclical side of the things, if the policy trade dispute is actually going to the right direction, if that's the case, the global economic slowdown that we saw this year should start to show next year's recovery. If the recovery happens, then the earnings growth rate for the most of the companies should benefit as well. And if that's the case, the rally should continue to happen in the future. The key factor has been that the short-term, long-term interest rate differential changes that affected the possibility of economic recession going into the future, that perspective has totally changed with this deal. We think that the year 2020 should be a year where economic growth rate slowing down should stop and maybe show some kind of slight recovery. And if that's the case, then overall equity market should continue to do well in the future.
Well, now, meanwhile, the exchange rate between the Korean won and the dollar has been pretty volatile recently. The won to the dollar is down a couple percent in just a few weeks. What's happening there?
Sure. If you look at the Korean won currency, it hit as high as 12.23 and it hit low as 11.56. And then once again, it rounded to 11.95 and then now back down to 11.60 territories. The reason why this is happening is because we think that fair won to U.S. dollar rate should be somewhere between 11.50 to 11.70 territories. Given the fact that Korea economic growth rate is at 2% plus, whereas pretty similar to U.S.'s economic growth rate of about 2.1%. So we don't think that the currency should aggressively depreciate or appreciate. We think that the range bound should be happening in the future. If the range bound continues to happen, that means that foreign investors should be net buyer of the Korean equity market because the undervalued valuations that you see in Korean equity market. With the fiscal budget passed and the monetary policy being easing and continue to boost the economic growth rate, we think that foreign investors' net buying of the Korean equity market should continue in the future. If that's the case, then we do think that Korean Kospi should start to hit maybe as high as 2,400 level next year.
All right, Mr. Yu, that's where we'll have to leave it for today. Thanks so much for making time. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now, President Moon has declared that his administration's core policy goal is the South Korean people's safety. In Tuesday's cabinet meeting, the president called for tighter safety measures on the nation's road and at workplaces. Take a listen.
국민 안전은 우리 정부의 핵심 국정 목표입니다. 국민은 재난에서 안전할 권리, 위험에서 보호받을 권리가 있고 국민의 생명과 안전에 대한 국가의 책임은 무한합니다.
There was a recent massive pileup on an icy expressway in the country's southeast that killed 7 people and injured many more. Existing standards, the president said, are insufficient, and he called for closer attention to be paid to safety, especially in winter. They say we're living through an AI revolution in which self-learning algorithms are transforming virtually every industry and gradually our everyday lives. That's why countries around the world are seeing AI as a strategic asset for their development. Korea's announced a new 10-year strategy for AI, and our Oh Soo-young has the details.
South Korea plans to overhaul its precautionary policies on new technologies to become a global powerhouse in artificial intelligence, with AI semiconductors at the forefront of that drive. The government on Tuesday revealed its 10-year national strategy for AI development, focusing on 3 areas. First, in order to build a sturdy AI ecosystem, the government aims to nurture core technologies such as AI chips that can support other innovations. Over the next decade, it will invest $863 million into next-generation semiconductors and strengthen basic research in machine learning algorithms and cognitive science. To encourage startups and new ventures, the government will expand funding for small and medium businesses in particular, dishing out $4.2 billion in 2020 alone. It will also build an AI hub in the southern city of Gwangju by 2024 and make all administrative data open to the public to encourage the creation of new services such as bike-sharing platforms. To support such ventures, the government says it will lay out a comprehensive roadmap next year, supporting innovation without the need for regulatory permission beforehand, a move that appears to heed years of criticism towards its strict policies on new technologies. The country will also reform its education system to help its citizens retrain and acquire relevant skill sets, from making AI-related courses mandatory in schools to expanding relevant programs at universities and creating specialized graduate courses. Professors from next year will also be permitted to work in private businesses to maximize knowledge sharing and synergy in R&D. And all members of the public will have greater access to online courses related to AI. Korea also aims to safeguard citizens from the potential fallout from AI technology. It will expand social insurance schemes and establish a national employment system to respond to the changing nature of jobs and employment conditions. Also, AI ethical standards will be adopted to protect people's privacy, safety and rights in the digital society. Planning to roll out artificial intelligence across all sectors and industries, from smart factories and farms to biohealth and military technology, the government expects AI to grow the economy by almost $400 billion by the year 2030. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
This week, Seoul is hosting an expo on the fourth industrial revolution. More than 100 companies taking part with all kinds of applications and gadgets you can try out for yourself. Our Ji-young went to check it out.
More than 100 companies are showing off their latest fourth industrial revolution technology at the next ICT Convergence Expo. People put on virtual reality goggles to enjoy a roller coaster without real tracks. Right next to that, they also got to enjoy virtual car racing. A company called PassNet showcased an application that changes cell phone screens to let pedestrians know when they are at a crosswalk. Also on show were robots capable of giving people information at places like museum or delivering food at restaurants and hotels. One of South Korea's leading 5G companies, LGU Plus, presented an application using augmented reality.
Through the application that utilizes artificial intelligence, viewers can enjoy the 5G U Plus gallery. Children can dance with the moving characters that they want and enjoy the videos.
Startup companies also showcased their technologies to try to attract investors. Conferences are also being held at the festival, where government officials from related ministries are announcing their plans and performances regarding the fourth industrial revolution.
The biggest achievement of the government's Fourth Industrial Revolution Committee was successfully drawing attention to the 3 bills regarding data. Also, for further growth and innovation in the future, the government's role is to support people who can lead growth and innovation to create quality jobs.
Experts at the conference are discussing future trends and strategies. German professor Henning Hagerman said cooperation on the fourth industrial revolution could be a win-win strategy for German companies. Ji-young, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.